On behalf of our team of judges, that includes Roberta and Michael and Ralph, we are delighted and pleased to be able to participate with you in this process. So I'm going to just go through the competition and the expectations, and then we'll get you started. So, so this is the part of the competition that you are taking on a fictitious business identity and assigning a fictitious business identity also to us as judges. So we do need to know our role. So please make sure that that's stated at the beginning of your presentation before you begin. You're going to have exactly 25 minutes to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem that you're describing, and to recommend a solution. That solution should pass muster on all three accounts. Again, we should hear from you on the solution from a legal perspective, financial perspective, and ethical perspective. And during this time, you will not be interrupted. So you'll have 25 minutes of uninterrupted time to make your case. When you're finished, we as judges in our role will have some Q&A for about 10 or 15 minutes. We'll be asking you some questions around your presentation. And then after that, we're gonna, pull ourselves out of our role into a role of just coaching and providing feedback to help prepare you for your next presentation. And so with that, are there any questions before we get started? All right, it sounds like we're ready. Got the presentation up and ready to go. We're excited. I have 18 minutes after the hour here. And so from there, we'll calculate 25 minutes. And so you may begin.
Hi, Grab Wheels Executive Board. This afternoon, we'll be presenting to you Take Charge of Grab Wheels, the Sustainable Development Plan away from Jakarta's dependency on cars. I'm Jagger Milliard, and I'm a strategist.
I'm Cameron Lubin, and I'm also a strategist.
I'm Annie Janetzi. I'm your financial analyst.
I'm Dennis Karachenko. I'm your ethics analyst.
I'm Shreya Venkat, and I'm your legal analyst.
And we're your Metro consultants. So to begin, as a consulting agency, we like to start with an executive breakdown of the company to assess the problem we're trying to solve, both internally and externally. Grab Wheels, as you all know, is a mobility arm of the Singapore-based ride-hailing company, Grab, that provides an electric scooter sharing service under the name of Grab Wheels. The problem we are trying to face is Grab Wheels is in need for an expansion in Jakarta, but with the road construction growth being only at 0.01% annually and the vehicular growth being at 9.5% annually, Jakarta cannot be mobile without changes being made to its infrastructure. In order to face both the traffic congestion and the need to expand Grab Wheels as a company, we need to partner with the government to implement a plan that will solve both of these issues that we will further assess. In this slide, you can see the stakeholders that we will get into during our ethical consideration and our implementation plan that we will also get into. Moving on to our drive as a company, we through our extensive plan for Grab Wheels, we will be referencing two sustainable development goals that will be targeted by our initiative and goals for Grab Wheels. One of our values at Metro Consulting is the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which serve as the urgent call for action to all countries by reaching these goals. By reaching these goals, we can achieve a better future for Grab Wheels, Jakarta, and ultimately the world. The two we will be focusing on are SDG 9 in industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and we will touch on how we will achieve this goal later on, and as well as 11 sustainable cities, communities, which will encompass our entire plan and drive to help Jakarta become more sustainable and mobile.
So to dive into the market overview, these will be the key drivers that will incentivize Grab Wheels to expand into Jakarta. So first of which is traffic gridlocks. The average Jakartan spends 10 years of their life in traffic, where the average driver starts and stops 33,000 times a year. And another point to make is that due to this immense amount of traffic and the immense amount of cars on the road and the inefficient manner of which these cars navigate the road, this leads to major air pollution, where only 2 days last year, Jakarta had air quality that was deemed healthy. And And an additional point is supply chains. So Indonesia had about 15.7 million passenger cars in 2020, and the number of motorcycles exceeded 115 million units. So given the immense amount of cars on the road, we believe that Jakarta presents an attractive opportunity for grab wheels to expand into an area that is in need and has a demand for alternatives to this heavy traffic. And given these alternative electric scooters, we believe that this can help mitigate air pollution in a major way. So given these factors, our strategic recommendation is that given Jakarta's status as one of the world's most polluted cities, we believe that there's an opportunity to expand for the mutual benefit of both the government and grab wheels. Given this, we believe that the funding, this project should be funded through a government public-private partnership where the government will give some sort of grant in exchange for grab wheels performing this project. And for the implementation of this recommendation, we also believe that increasing marketing and advertising activities would help facilitate this plan as well. So to dive into some actual expansion avenues, one expansion avenue that we believe would be useful is increasing last mile scooter coverage on bus routes. And we will expand on this later in the presentation, but essentially buses would help cover the bulk transportation. But in the areas where individuals still need to reach their final destination, these electric scooters would serve this purpose. And so we believe that allocating this, we also believe that allocating funding to increase public awareness of motorcycle and car alternatives would further drive demand for Jakartan citizens to make this transition. And last of which, we believe that increasing the availability of charging stations across the city for these electric scooters would help facilitate the overall transition and help make it convenient for Jakartans to switch.
To expand our expansion plan, we have included an image of the current public bus routes found within Jakarta. The starred routes are where you can find your grab wheel scooter stations currently, which are 7 stations in Jakarta. We think the best decision for expansion will be to implement 14 new EV scooter stations along bus routes now currently covered by grab wheels. Grab wheels, we want to implement the scooter stations into bus routes 5, 8, 9, and 10 and implement 14 of those stations. Grab wheels has a plan of providing end-to-end travel needs ultimately for their lifetime goals with their scooters. However, in order to do this, we must implement the last mile need, which my colleague Jagger mentioned earlier.
So to add a little bit more detail on what a government public-private partnership is as a broad level overview, the government would give a grant to grab wheels to help fund the project. And so grab wheels would then turn this funding into expansion for their expansion into the country. And so while they expand with these electric scooters, we believe that a government public-private partnership is to the mutual benefit of both parties, as grab wheels is able to get the funding for the project, and the government is able to solve both their traffic and their pollution issues. And to touch on some marketing solutions that we propose, some potential avenues that we believe that grab wheels could undertake is first in-app promotions. So grab wheels could offer free or discounted rides to boost onboarding rates for these new electric scooters and help incentivize people to join the platform. The next solution, I believe, is that increased print advertising would allow for increased awareness across the city of this new alternative to cars. And the last of which is increased social media presence. Grab wheels currently doesn't have any social media accounts across any major social media platforms. So we believe that increasing this presence would further drive the idea of awareness behind the project and help further facilitate the implementation of this plan.
So before we go more in depth into the details of our PPP plan for grab wheels, we first wanted to address the general benefits of PPPs as a whole. And so one of the benefits that you get from being in a PPP with the government is increased efficiency in completing large scale products, because a private company has more resources than the government to complete the project. So therefore it'll be done faster and the resources will be used more efficiently. You also get increased economic growth, and that's from hiring like contractors and construction workers to create things like the charging stations that we need. So that'll increase the economic growth of Jakarta as a whole. And then it also increases competition and innovation. And as we'll discuss later on in our presentation, GrabWheels has a few competitors in Jakarta as it is. And so by being the first company to form a partnership with the government, they'll be a step ahead of the competition. And then there's also an increase in the quality of service. And this goes hand in hand with the efficiency, because the private company has resources that the government just doesn't have access to. And there's also a decrease in risk. And that's because the government and the private company, in this case, GrabWheels, you guys, would be sharing the risk of the project. So it's a decreased risk on both of the parts. That being said, we should also discuss some of the drawbacks. And one of them is that the profit is typically based on the risk, the competition, and complexity of the project. And in this case, there definitely is a risk considering the safety concerns that have been brought up before about e-scooters, especially in Indonesia, that we'll dive deeper into later in the presentation. But given GrabWheels' history and reputation and their experience working in other countries like Singapore, the risk is definitely a lot lower than if the government was to work with a different company. And the contracts are long-term, complicated, and inflexible, but those are all things that can be negotiated and decided. And if it's a long-term contract, it's more like you have a long-term stream of revenue, and you also have a project that you're working on, so it's more beneficial than not. And there is also a higher cost for the government, because they'll be monitoring for more reliable quality of service, but that cost is worth it to ensure the safety of the people who will be using the project. Yeah. So now we'll talk about the types of PPPs that we looked at before deciding to give a recommendation on which one, and those are build, operate, transfer, design, build, operate, design, build, maintain, and build, own, and operate. So looking at the first one, build, own, operate, it's one of the most common PPP agreements. And with that one, the private sector has both the construction and operating rights for like a specific period of time. But then after that period of time, the government takes back those rights. So the ownership of the end result of the project would go back to the government. Yeah. So, and also with this one, it's not just a company that's working with the government, it's an entire sector, which we didn't really think was favorable in these conditions, which is why we didn't go with that one. And then with design, build, operate, it's only one contract with one business, which is definitely more favorable. And in this case, the private business gets to design, build, and operate the project as is implied by the name, but the government gets to retain legal ownership, which we didn't really like. So we decided that was also not a good option for us. And then the other one we looked at was design, build, maintain. And this one is where the government has certain requirements for the project, and then the private partner has to design, build, and maintain the facility in accordance to these requirements. But because the government is responsible for the operations, they also maintain the legal ownership of the end result, which we also didn't find very favorable. So we ultimately went with build, own, operate, which is when the private entity gets to design, build, operate, and maintain the project, and the government just finances it. But in this one, the private entity gets to retain legal ownership of the project, which we thought was really important. And we'll go more in depth into the finances of the PPP in depth later on. So our recommendation is build, own, operate for the reasons I explained earlier. So we should talk a bit more about about Indonesia and its history with public-private partnerships. Over the past 15 years, Indonesia has made significant progress developing PPPs. They've signed 24 PPP contracts, and the total investment value of them has been $16.87 billion, or 246.38 million Indonesian rupees. And then these PPPs are offered to private companies through the Indonesian government, and they have to go through the Ministry of Economic Affairs and the National Development Planning Agency. And then in terms of financing, they have to also talk to the Ministry of Finance. So there are some regulations that have been put in place, but in the last decade, they've been a bit more lenient and they've been revised. Like after the issuance of the presidential regulation in 2015, they revoked previous regulations on PPPs that were more in terms of restrictions. And then that same regulation created the government contracting agency, which plays a pretty big role in the financing aspect of PPPs. And the reason why they removed these regulations was to encourage investors to develop infrastructure projects using PPPs to provide tax incentives. And this is one of the reasons why we're pitching a PPP with the Indonesian government to Grab Wheels. And so the next thing I want to talk about was intellectual property. And this was a pretty big point to us because typically with PPPs, as you saw from the examples we mentioned earlier, the other different types, a lot of it ends up with the government retaining property of the PPPs, of the projects. So the intellectual property, it would be something that it was initially Grab Wheels, because the government would have ownership of the project, the intellectual property would go to them, which we didn't think was very fair, which is why we chose build, own, operate as our PPP recommendation type, because it would be the one where Grab Wheels gets to retain ownership of their intellectual property. So there would be no need for us to discuss intellectual property in the actual contract because there's no transfer of intellectual property at all.
Moving on to the financial analysis of this plan, we created an income statement that highlights the revenue estimate that we pulled from current Grab Wheels publications of their revenue in Indonesia and their success in Indonesia with their current 7 stations. And we adjusted these numbers to fit our plan to implement 14 new EV stations, as well as the increase in exposure that will come from the marketing campaign as mentioned earlier. The advertising campaign numbers were estimated according to similar campaigns made by competitors such as Bird Scooters in Europe with their current expansion plan there. The cost of scooters average at about $800 per scooter, and each station will hold around 10 scooters. The bike lane pavement estimates include the paintings of bike lanes and coverings of old road markings, as well as the implementations of road signs for those bike lanes. These numbers are drawn from Portland State University's urban planning research team, which can be found in our appendix. Lastly, we calculated repairs to be about 35%, as the average repair rate for scooters is about 30 to 40% per year. Corporate taxes are 25% annually for companies in Jakarta. However, with the implementation of the PPP, we may be tax exempted, which will increase our profits and decrease our costs. 50 cents is the average ride for a scooter. So it costs 50 cents for a 5-minute ride in Jakarta with the Grab Wheels scooter. So that's how we pulled from the how much money we're making from our merchandise sale or from your merchandise sales. In conclusion, you can view in the net earnings here, it's $903,000 in the first year with the investment of the advertising campaign, bike lane pavements, and the other investments you see. But in the next year, as you know, with initial investments we don't have to make again, such as the bike lane pavements and installing the new EV stations, your profits will increase much more throughout the years. Moving on to how this plan will be funded. As mentioned, we're using the public-private partnership, if approved, the build, own, operate that my colleague expanded upon. And so with that, we plan on covering half of the cost with the PPP and then half of the cost with current funds under Grab Wheels. While doing research with your company, we found that during your Series A investment, you received a $30 million investment from Kimco, which is a Taiwanese company that manufactures motor scooters, motorcycles, and ATVs for worldwide distribution. With this $30 million investment, I'm sure you want to give it back into your company and utilize it towards plans such as this one. So the total costs come to about $147,000 to about $300,000 with the PPP, and then the other half of the cost would go towards the Kimco investment fund that we would utilize. So the costs range from if we utilize it without the tax exemption and then with the tax exemption. If we were to be tax exempted, then the cost would drop by about $300,000 or about 2 million Indonesian rupiah. So as a company, Grab Wheels loves safety. And with this plan, we want to ensure that your customers are being safe and your customers are ensured safety. So with the implementation of this plan, we ensure this by including accommodations to the new scooters that your scooters already have. So when purchasing new scooters, you would be purchasing scooters that already are programmed the way your scooters are programmed. So for example, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. is when the scooters run. After that, they do not run. And this is to prevent nightly crashes. Helmets are included with each ride, as well as flashing lights on each scooter. And then the bike lane installations will also make it a lot safer for customers to utilize your scooters. And additionally, Grab Wheels will work with the Jakarta government to create new safety regulations if need be. And this comes hand in hand with the PPP implementation. So as we touched upon the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of this plan, we wanted to identify this in one section specifically, just so you can look at it all and see just how great this plan is for you all. So this plan will increase your consumer base. We projected it to be about 20% with the marketing implementation and the implementation of the new scooters. And then this would create really great brand awareness for your company across Indonesia and worldwide. And it would be a great idea for a strategic partnership with the government, as it would be really beneficial for your company. And then worldwide, it would help lower carbon emissions, as we know that is definitely a pressing issue in the world. And this will increase your opportunities to expand your Grab Wheels ecosystem. So for example, Grab Wheels sells helmets, chargers, and tools, and then more consumers means more purchases for these types of products. So the Grab Wheels helmet, charger, tool. And the last mile, as I mentioned earlier, will lead to the end-to-end e-scooter travel. So the more people that are using your scooters, the more they will utilize it, not just for the last mile, but also for the beginning of their destination to the end of their destination, kind of eliminating the usage of cars as a whole. Some threats maybe are competition, or your competition, GoShare, Gojek, and Gogoro. However, to this day, and we plan to continue this on with our plan, Grab Wheels is the biggest e-scooter company in Indonesia, and we want to continue this by implementing a great plan such as this one.
So we need to talk about essentially why this is an important project for you specifically to take on as Grab Wheels. So we'll be taking a look at the ethical theory, social contract theory. Essentially what this means is that as a society, we all come together to devise a system of rules and ethical laws which we all abide by to create a happy, healthy society for everyone. Now, within this framework, we can say that car pollution and traffic congestion will negatively affect everyone in society. And that if everyone can come together to achieve a positive end, namely to reduce pollution and traffic, then they should pursue that end to create the better society. And Grab Wheels specifically should pursue this end because they are in the best possible position to do so, and the entities who are the closest able to do it should be the ones enterprising on that. But we have to talk about how this plan implemented will be ethical as well. So we'll be taking a look at stakeholder theory, which emphasizes managing a plan for all stakeholders rather than simply just the shareholders of a business. This also takes into account the triple bottom line approach to business rather than simply approaching profits. This will reject the shareholders first rule and will eliminate unwanted compromises made in a business. And our management goals is looking to maximize and put people first before profits or any other motives. So with the stakeholder analysis, we find that Grab Wheels is going to offer the capital and sort of intellect provided for the infrastructure to how to design, create, and operate and manage it. The Jakarta government will be offering loans and the PPP agreement to Grab Wheels. Lenders will provide additional funds if needed, and investors will agree to this partnership between Grab Wheels and Jakarta. Additionally, contractors will develop and maintain infrastructure, and consumers will get to reap the benefits of this plan with greater convenience in their travels and less pay and pollution and traffic. So we want to identify the metrics of success for our project. So we're going to be looking at pollution and traffic congestion mainly. So through the implementation of e-scooters and the reduction of cars is going to lead to less pollution, air emissions, and less traffic congestion as there's less cars clogging up the road. Additionally, we want to stress that community buy-in is an important part. Through our advertising campaign, we aim to make this a greater buy-in. Additionally, we want to focus that efficiency is another main focus of our plan.
And then this gets us into the 3I the 3I timeline for Jakarta. Within the first 1 to 5 years, we're going to work to initiate the simple. That's the implementation with Jakarta, from expanding, as my colleague touched on, the 14 new bus stops, and using those hubs as centers for grab wheels to continue on their expansion. Then we move on to the next phase, which is to integrate the complex, which is year 10 to 14. And this is more so expanding into the cities with more direct routes, connecting bus lanes all the way through to the urban district cities as well. Moving on, then you have the innovate the region, which is finishing up the project plans, the last mile plan into 3 new cities, and all the way then going to year 20, which is expanding the program even further into a new nation. This jumps into the specifics of how e-scooters will develop throughout year 1 through year 10. Same with 11 to 20. Now for the company comparisons, we noted how 2 e-bike companies ended up failing, and then how recently the e-scooters are actually exceeding within Singapore and Australia.
So in conclusion with these factors, we believe that this would be the best possible solution for a further expansion of grab wheels as an enterprise.
Okay, wow, you guys are right on time here. The perfect timing, 25 minutes, almost exactly to the second. So great job, dear, and thank you. So at this point, we have some questions for you, some opportunities to dive a little bit more deeper into your presentation with some questions from our board. And so we'll look to Ralph, or Roberta, and Michael, to start that process. So who wants to start first? Go ahead, Michael. Yeah, you're muted.
There you go. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation and coming in to present it. But we went through some of the slides a little bit quickly. What is the total number of new scooters you're planning to put on site? Because I saw something that said 14 new stations with 10 scooters per station. That's only 140. And we'd be hard pressed to get to 1.5 billion in revenue based on that.
Yeah, so currently Grab Wheels has only 10 scooters per station. And so with this plan, of course, you can adjust it to implement more scooters per station if you want to adjust your revenue goals as well.
Okay, and then the other question I have with regard to the last mile, we have into city rush, out of city rush. So into city rush, people will ride the bus to the depot, the station, the bus stop, pick up the scooter, ride their last mile to their place of work. How do we constantly replenish the supply of scooters at that station, depot, bus stop, so that succeeding buses, when they discharge their passengers have a scooter to ride?
Yeah, so typically in scooter businesses, especially American ones, I can speak on those. They typically have like a service, like auxiliary service, where at the end of each day they go and collect the scooters and bring them back to their original spots for charging. So the idea behind it would just be, it would be built into the maintenance of the scooters.
Thank you.
Okay.
Um,
Roberta, go ahead. Ralph, go ahead, Ralph.
Oh, thank you. Excellent presentation. I'm almost immediately and 100% convinced, and I love the idea of your proposal around a PPP. I wonder though, so you mentioned from an ethical perspective, the stakeholder consideration where you're not in the traditional format of a corporation focusing just on the fiduciary responsibilities to the shareholders, to the investors, but more broadly, you're thinking about stakeholders. And I think the world is definitely headed in that direction. But do you think that lowers the returns to investors so that investors are going to want to put less capital into this business because you're focused on this holistic stakeholder theory, which then puts more the responsibility on government to fund the capital? I'm just curious how you think about the trade-off of one versus the other.
Yeah, so we think that approaching this enterprise through a stakeholder model, although it may seem to reduce initial profits, we think that pursuing this through sort of this long-term plan over 20 years, that fostering this kind of cooperation with the stakeholders and people and everyone involved, that through this we can lead to a more prosperous plan that will guide us into the future to have a larger long-term profits rather than larger short-term profits. So that way, in the long term, investors will still be able to reap the same, if not greater, rewards rather than focusing on a strictly shareholder focused idea.
Okay, Roberta, any thoughts, questions, comments?
Yes, thank you, Joe. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I have an overarching question that I would love for you to clarify. You mentioned that there were quite a few competitors in the marketplace, and I'm wondering what the pitch would be for the government to pick our company instead of others. What is distinct about our company in comparison to the other competitors that you made reference to in your presentation?
I think the great success that GrabWheels already currently has in Indonesia and in Asia as a whole should be a sign for the Jakarta government to take on this company. Also, this company, your company has like ensured safety measures. You know, when doing research upon the other competitors, they've definitely had a few safety regulation problems when it comes to their scooters. However, GrabWheels ensures that, and I know that the Jakarta government would want to ensure not only the safety of the GrabWheels consumers, but the people around them, the civilians that are driving around them. They want to ensure that everyone is safe and that, you know, traffic congestion problems can decrease. And this plan as a whole can implement that and can decrease the traffic congestion, which will ultimately just help Jakarta overall.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I have two questions. Great job. I mean, really smooth, polished presentations and slides, really good. So one of the questions I'll start with, and then I'll go to the other one. It's a very short question, and I want to understand more deeply, what are the safety risks that you talked about throughout the presentations to do this? So think about outlining what are the safety risks relative to this project. My other question, though, is, you know, you did a good job describing, you know, the problem, lack of roads, traffic congestion, air pollution, supply chain, all of that. Well done. My question is around the timing of this investment relative to our current pandemic, where most people will not travel on a bus and, you know, public transportation because of exposure. So is there some thinking around the timing of this? Maybe, you know, we should really not even consider this until after the pandemic is fully gone and out of the way, or I hate to make this investment and then we have that big factor there that could be, that could undermine our efforts. So your thoughts on that?
Well, thank you for your concern. One of the first things that you asked us to touch on was the safety measures. These safety measures are already in place, as in speed limits, around 15.5 miles per hour. That there's legal signs within Jakarta right now. That's just there so that even though there are collisions that have happened, one, it reduces the speed of impact, and also with the helmet safety that already exists, there's actually a locking system that was invented in 2020 during the pandemic that you can actually lock your helmet within attached to the e-scooter. And of course, many just think you could just lock it on. However, it connects within an electronic system. You can actually lock and unlock with your phone and mobile app to pass it on to my other colleagues.
Yeah, so to address your second question about is it a good idea to implement this project now or wait? Well, the way our project works, the way our timeline works is that we wouldn't like it's more like a soft launch. We're not gonna like immediately just have a bunch of new scooters out. It's gonna be like in waves kind of. So we can first start with each municipality in Jakarta because there's 5 different ones. And the other thing with Jakarta is that there's a lot of bank headquarters there. So there's going to be people who are going to be there anyways. So these scooters would be beneficial for people like that who still have to go to work, because a lot of times their job is something that you have to go into the office for. So there's plenty of consumers that would still rely on this and would still use this. So yeah, that's our answer to that.
And to add on, e-scooter companies have seen great increases in revenue and usage throughout the world, specifically in Jakarta as well. In 2020, obviously, when the pandemic first hit, there was a drop in sales and in rise of e-scooters. But as time went on and as the year passed, 2021 was Grabwheel's best year in revenue. And so if it still follows that track and that pattern, then e-scooter rides will continue. And as my colleague mentioned, people still have to get to work, people still have to get around, get to school. And in order to ensure that we have to, provide them with rides, which we will do with our plan.
And to also add on to that, there's also, you mentioned how people don't want to ride buses anymore. So people could just go scooter to scooter. Go bus stop to bus stop using the scooters instead. So because the whole point of the scooter is that you're basically given now a form of public transport where you can now go on your own pace and you don't have to worry about how close you are to someone else because you have your own mode of transportation, but you also have the ease and I guess you don't have the guilt of knowing that you're contributing to more pollution when Jakarta is already has already a lot of pollution.
Great. Thank you so very much. So let's go back to any other questions from our panel, Roberta, Ralph, or Michael. Any other additional questions?
Yeah. I had one question. I apologize. My internet dropped there for a while.
Yeah.
You talked about your long range plans actually going out 20 years. Did you at all consider the move of the Indonesian capital from Jakarta to Nusantara? I know they don't have a firm timeline on that, but it gives you the opportunity to get in on the ground floor and start things working right in the new location. And maybe by that time you'll have all the revenue you need, the revenue stream you need, having paid back the government, and then to do it on your own. And that's not to mean it gotcha. It just did look at it.
Yeah, so the whole reason why we picked Jakarta in the first place was because of how much pollution is Jakarta. It wasn't really about it being the capital. It
Okay.
was just happened to be a happy coincidence. But to continue on that, and a part of our plan, I don't know if like the long-term part of our plan, like we have our actual plan, and then like another added benefit that we were expecting to happen is, so if this 20-year plan goes well, then that kind of sets Grabwheels up in a good position to like create a new contract with like a new PPP with the government for more areas in Indonesia, so that we could expand and we could help reduce pollution in all the other cities as well.
And to
Good
add
answer.
on, Yeah, just to like add on, the population in Jakarta is still a massive population that, you know,
Yeah.
we want to still serve and help. And obviously the capital is moving to kind of face those environmental concerns. And so with the
Correct.
capital moving, there definitely will be less people maybe in Jakarta. However, it's quite hard to move 10 million people from like one area to another. So right now we are focusing on Jakarta because there is such a great environmental problem there, as my colleague mentioned.
Good answers. Thank you.
A quick question regarding the population. How do you feel this will appeal to individuals from different generations? Do you have a sense of that landscape?
So when we did research about the average like age of a e-scooter rider, it was much older than we assumed. So it's typically people between the ages of 30 to 45. So obviously a younger generation still, but with that, we understand that that is definitely a prime like working generation. So they're the ones like going to and from work. And then e-scooters are also popular amongst young individuals going to school rides or for joy rides and things like that. So we assume that those generations will accommodate well to the adjustments of more scooters around them. I believe that they will, you know, continue to ride them and ride them even more often if they're suddenly surrounded by them. However, with older generations, you know, we do understand that they might not accommodate well to the e-scooters. However, with this plan, they'll still benefit from it because their traffic will be a lot less congested. It'll be a lot easier to get onto a bus. It'll be a lot easier to, you know, if they choose to drive a car, but we want them to not. And then with the popularization of the e-scooter, perhaps like older generations will also understand like why they are so popular and, you know, enjoy them as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Ralph, you get the last word if you have any other questions.
Oh, I'm honored.
Yes.
So I do think Jakarta is such an excellent city to pick, given everything I've read about the chaotic nature of that city and the crazy level of pollution. I'm really interested in the slide that you had up showing the case studies of companies, similar companies that failed. And I was wondering, I think if I was the government, I would want to have an answer to why you wouldn't be one of those future case studies. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on how those business models may be different from what you're proposing here and why the government should have confidence that it's a solid business model?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for the question. Yes, with the companies we did mention, we looked at companies that did well in the past, but that doesn't mean they're doing well now. And those two companies that are failing and kind of crashed and burned were the e-biking companies, and they were based in Beijing. These companies ended up managing their wealth. They expanded too rapidly and internationally, and they were unable to pay back their debts. Specifically, that was OFO, and then Mobike. Just to dive a little deep, OFO missed an opportunity to merge with Mobike. And as Mobike continued to rise within 2015 to 2019, just before the pandemic, they saw a huge discrepancy within their business model, and it ended up bringing the company to crumbles right before the pandemic hit. However, one of the companies we highlighted in the middle of the slide was the Neuron, and this is a Singapore-based e-scooter company. And this was one of the main comparables we wanted to bring, as a Neuron Mobility is targeting Australia and New Zealand. No one is, you could say, caring for Jakarta. And that's why we know that Grab Wheels is already invested in Jakarta, and we want to not necessarily use their model that they've used in Australia and New Zealand, but we want to emphasize how important that developing Jakarta really is, and that since we already have the ties, that we need to continue on to the future using this, using Grab Wheels as a company.
And to add one more thing on the strength of Grab Wheels, and another reason why it's not prone to fail is because Grab is the mobility arm of the overall Singaporean company Grab. And so last year, Grab actually went public through a special purpose acquisition. They're valued at $40 billion. So I believe that this name brand is another component as to why it wouldn't be prone to fail. And even in the transition period, given that they're an arm of the business and that Grabwheels in part is, they still would be on the hook for a portion of the funding. We believe that in any worst case scenario, there would be alternative ways to bring the company out of some sort of rut. And so I think that that's a good way to mitigate the risk as well.
Wow, great job. Okay,
Thank you.
so we will then conclude this section of our both presentation and Q&A to you, and then sort of change our capes to be more of a coach and provide some feedback for you at this point in time. So before we do that, I'll give you all a hand for just a great job in the presentation and hard work, and as well as the Q&A, that some really tough questions coming at you. So, and you handled them well. And so right now we'll just kind of give some feedback, some comments around what we liked and what areas of opportunity that we could think of. So we'll call on again, Michael, Roberta, and Ralph for any comments, starting with feedback and coaching.
Okay, since my name was mentioned first, I'll go first. Again, very good. I know you were all feeling the time crunch as we got near the end, and we went through slides a little bit quicker. The tempo of the presentation got a little bit quicker. Some of us old people don't quite hear everything that's being said, and we're trying to look at the slides as well, because your discussion should amplify the slides. I was at another presentation earlier today that was death by PowerPoint. The person just read the slides and it killed you. But very good. I really like the bumper stickers down at the bottom. We show where we're talking about here: integrate, innovate, and the italics on there to help that out. Again, with the speeding up, we're all going to get a little bit tongue-tied. Keep yourself some 3x5, 5x7 cards, whatever, with just the key words on that or the key phrase you want the audience to have as a takeaway. That way you don't have to look up at this guy. What was the number? I don't really need 246, whatever it was. It's a lot of money. Okay, so that's good. The altruistic aspect was very enjoyable, and shutting down the lanes for a certain period of time for maintenance, recapture of the equipment, reposition, charging, that type of stuff. Also well thought out, and I appreciate the review you gave to all of the different public-private partnerships. Thank you.
Great job, Mike. Okay, Roberta.
Again, excellent presentation. I want to emphasize that the slides were very nice, sleek, graphics very effective. I'm going to have to agree with Mike. I felt like the pace was so quick that I was having, as the audience, I was having a little bit of a challenge absorbing all the information. If I could give a piece of advice on that front, it would be to condense and tighten up some of those slides. For example, I think the multiple slides on PPPs, if you could find a way to tighten that up again and just be a couple of slides, and there's some other areas as well, I think that would be much more effective with your audience, and just like giving them the key takeaways, or having the information or the data points that you really want to pop from those slides. I think that would be very helpful overall, and it would hopefully slow down the pace of your presentation, which was quite quick. And I know it was action packed and it was wonderful, and there was a lot of great information in there, but at times it was a little bit of overload. So if you can find some places to tweak that a little bit, I think that would be helpful in the effectiveness of your overall presentation. But otherwise, nice job.
Great, thank you. All right, Ralph.
Boy, that 25 minutes went so fast. I didn't even realize when it was over. Each of you did such a good job with your presentation. You have a very polished and natural style, all of you. And I was really impressed with the presentation. And I love the slides, maybe a few too many words in a few of the slides where it's a little bit easier to process if you make the font a little bit bigger and then just speak to the bullets rather than overloading us with too much information. But I think for me, that's a really small point. And I actually kind of like the rapid cadence that you took with that. I feel like it allowed us judges to be able to be exposed to more information. I love that you picked Jakarta for a city. I mean, that city, from everything I know about it, is such a mess and it needs some serious solutions. I'm personally a private investment. I've got a heavy private investment bias versus the kind of PPP structures that you're talking about. But I think you made a compelling case that in a city like Jakarta, a purely private solution isn't going to solve the problem. Like these lanes that you're talking about, a private enterprise, no matter how much capital they've raised, they don't have that, they can't get that done without cooperation from a public entity. And I think it makes sense what you're saying. The helmet thing was a little bit confusing to me. I wasn't quite sure how effective that was going to be as a solution on the safety side, but I think you could put governors in scooters or whatever too. And I like the daytime only versus at nighttime because people do some pretty crazy stuff with the scooters. So excellent job. And I learned a lot. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ralph. So my sense is similar to, again, our esteemed panel of judges. You can tell they are extremely experienced. And so I don't have much to add other than, again, very professional, polished, flowing in terms of really answering, the core parts of what we're asking for in terms of what are the ethical dimensions. The financial overview was very helpful. And then the legal perspectives were handled well. And so, what else can we say? Just well done. The slides were innovative and smooth, almost like, it seems like this team's been here before because and that's a good thing. So experience matters, but I think that you've really done a good job in meshing together the message and the presentation together as a one. And each one of you really participated balanced in a balanced way in terms of the conversation. So, I really don't have any recommendations for changes. I just think that, I also, one of the things that also was interesting in the Q&A, so it's one thing to have a presentation, but what's really powerful is Q&A. And what I love to hear, and I heard it a few times, thank you for the question. That's a nice touch, and even those questions where it was like, gotcha, right? You kept your composure, right? And follow through, right, Mike? So there you go. So I just think it's a great job. So do you have any questions for us before we let you go? Any questions or thoughts for us before we let you go?
I have a question. If you guys were actually grab wheels, would you agree to take on our plan?
Oh, what a closing question. I don't know, Mike, what do you think? Roberta, what do you think about? That's
I need more data. I need more data because there were a couple things as well. We compared numbers on Indonesia in general versus Jakarta at one place. My experience, I'm in Virginia Beach, and the experience with e-scooters here is that Lime and Bird dumped them in the city and didn't talk to anybody, didn't discuss anything, and all of a sudden they were going whiz bang all around everywhere and nobody knew what to do. Right now we don't have any because they upset the apple cart so much that the city council banned them. But they did geofence them, which goes to one of the questions that Ralph asked, and that was good. The other thing I just want to comment on Annie Genetzi, is it? I was impressed because the brief says you're an IS major, but you're the financial analyst here. So it seems like you're stepping out of your comfort zone, and that impressed me in and of itself. This does not take away from everyone else because everyone else did a superb job, but I just was impressed by that little niche.
And Annie, I would say you would be invited back. As you know, these are long processes. So you would be, I think, we have to consult with the board here, but I think you would be invited back for more information and more dialogue, I think, right, Mike? So that's a good move. And that's your advance that you want.
Absolutely.
Right. Any other questions at all from anyone else? Oh, our Dr. Ray.
I'm the coach. I just want to say the reason why I love this competition is because we have the most positive judging experience of all the competitions we're part of. So thanks for your time and thanks for the feedback to these young people. But they work hard, and it's always great to come across judges who care about their development first and foremost. So thank you again.
Right.
They're going to go far.
All right. Wonderful. Well, if there's nothing else, then we will call it a wrap. All the best in your next presentation tomorrow.